What comes to mind when you think of Vikings? Are you reminded of strong warriors who sailed across the seas, or fierce raiders pillaging villages for their next meal? Did you know that they also had unique traditions and beliefs that played a huge part in their daily lives? Well, today's video will be about the darker side of those traditions. Buckle up, because we are about to take a look at 5 Viking rituals too dark to believe. So let's get started. Number 5. Blood oaths of warriors. A blood oath was a sacred promise made between two people to either reinforce an existing bond or establish a new one. However, the process of forming a blood oath among Vikings was anything but ordinary. It was violent and painful. In fact, it was a procedure that involved slashing open a vein, usually on the arm, and allowing the blood to drip onto a rock or object held by the other person. This practice was done to show trust and loyalty to one another. According to the Eddas, there was even a specific type of blood oath taken by warriors before battle. As chronicled in the poem Völusp, it stated that the warrior would cut his hand and dip his fingers in blood and sprinkle the blood around him while calling upon Odin and Thor for strength. But perhaps the most well-known oath comes from the legendary shield maiden Brynhildr. In the Volsunga saga, she was asked to swear an oath by the gods that she would marry the man who slew the dragon Fafnir. She accepted the oath, dipped her hand in boiling water, and placed it on a stone, thus sealing her fate. Number 4. Burial rites with the dead. The Vikings were known to have elaborate burial practices for their dead. In fact, the burials varied depending on the status of the individual being laid to rest. The practice of burying the dead with grave goods has been found in many different cultures and societies throughout history. And the Vikings were no exception. They believed that the afterlife was a continuation of life on Earth, and that the dead would need supplies for their journey into the next world. This is why they buried their dead with food, weapons, jewelry, and other items that they would need. But there was a specific ritual that they followed when burying a chieftain or a member of the royal family. This ritual was meant to honor the dead and ensure their safe passage into the afterlife. During the burial ceremony, the body of the dead person was placed in a coffin and then covered with a large mound of earth. The mound was then decorated with stones or wooden posts to mark the grave. But this was not the end of the ceremony. The Vikings also held a funeral feast in honor of the dead. This feast was meant to celebrate the life of the person who had died and to give their family and friends a chance to say goodbye. During the feast, the family and friends of the dead person would eat, drink, and make merry in their honor. After the feast, they would return to the grave and offer sacrifices to the gods. These sacrifices could be in the form of animals or food, and they were meant to ensure that the dead person's soul would be taken care of in the afterlife. Overall, the Viking burial rituals were a way for them to honor their dead and to ensure their safe passage into the afterlife. They believed that the afterlife was a continuation of life on Earth and that the dead would need supplies for their journey. Therefore, they buried their dead with grave goods and held a funeral feast in their honor. Number 3. The human sacrifice at Uppsala. Human sacrifice was a common practice among the Vikings from the 8th to 11th centuries. In fact, it was such a common practice that there are numerous accounts of it in the Norse sagas and Eddas. One of the most famous examples of human sacrifice among the Vikings is the story of King Ragnar Lothbrok. In the Norse saga, it is said that Ragnar sacrificed 81 of his best men to the god Thor in order to avenge his son's death. But there was a place in Scandinavia where the practice of human sacrifice reached its peak. The place was called Uppsala, and it was located in modern-day Sweden. There is evidence that human sacrifice took place at the Viking Age settlement of Birka. Archaeologists found a mass grave with the remains of around 500 people, including many foreign mercenaries. But what makes this site so significant is that it was used for over 500 years, from the 9th to the 13th century. This is much longer than any other archaeological site in Scandinavia. Many historians believe that these people were not killed in battle, but rather intentionally sacrificed. The Vikings believed that by sacrificing humans, they could appease the gods and gain their favor. They also believed that by sacrificing humans, they could ensure the fertility of their crops and the health of their livestock. While it may seem barbaric to us today, human sacrifice was a common practice among many ancient cultures. The Vikings were not the only ones who practiced this ritual, but they were some of the most well-known for it. Number 2. Saeder magic rituals. Saeder magic was a type of magic that was practiced by the Vikings in the late Iron Age and the Viking Age. The word saeder comes from the Old Norse word saed, which means magic or sorcery. Saeder was a complex system of magic that was used for a variety of purposes, such as healing, divination, protection, and harm. The practice of saeder was controversial in Norse culture, as it was seen as a bit taboo. It was mostly associated with women and was often viewed with suspicion by society. Despite this, it was still practiced and was considered an important part of Viking culture. One of the main practitioners of saeder was a female figure known as a sedkona. The sedkona was a seeress who was able to communicate with the gods and use their power to help or harm others. She would use runes, which were ancient Germanic letter-like symbols that had magical properties, to cast her spells. Another aspect of saeder magic was the use of animal skins and bones. These materials were used to create amulets and charms that were believed to have protective or healing powers. For example, a Viking warrior might wear a bear skin amulet to give himself courage and strength in battle. It is also believed that the Vikings practiced a form of spirit possession during their saeder rituals. Practitioners would enter a trance-like state and allow spirits to enter their bodies so that they could communicate with the gods more directly. Overall, saeder magic was an integral part of Viking culture and was used for a variety of purposes. Despite the controversy surrounding its practice, it continued to thrive in Norse society. Number 1. Offering to the sea and giants. The Vikings were known to be fierce warriors, but they were also deeply spiritual people. In fact, they had a unique set of beliefs and customs that were centered around their relationship with the natural world. One of the most fascinating aspects of Viking religion was their reverence for nature. They believed that the natural world was inhabited by spirits and that these spirits could influence human affairs. For example, they believed that the sea was a powerful force that needed to be respected and appeased. This is why they offered sacrifices to the sea, usually in the form of valuable objects or even human sacrifices. They also believed that giants lived in the mountains and forests, and they would offer sacrifices to the giants in order to gain their favor. These offerings could be anything from food and drink to weapons and armor. But perhaps the most interesting thing about Viking offerings is the ritual surrounding them. They didn't just throw their offerings into the sea or leave them in the forest. They had specific ways of presenting their gifts to the spirits of the sea and the giants. For example, they might build a cairn or a mound of stones and place the offering on top. Or they might bury the offering in a shallow pit and cover it with a layer of soil. These rituals were not only a way to show respect for the natural world, but they were also a way to connect with it. The Vikings believed that by following these rituals, they were able to establish a relationship with the spirits of the sea and the giants. This relationship was beneficial to them because it meant that they had the support and protection of these powerful beings. History isn't just in the past, it's alive in the stories we choose to remember. We hope you enjoyed this journey through time. If you did, hit the like button, leave a comment with the ritual you found the darkest, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of the past. See you next time!